Our Outside View with Jenna Laine covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and she, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline with a look at this week's opponent, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 48 points, Jenna. How big of a surprise was that offensive explosion last week from this Buccaneers team? Weren't you waiting for that all of last year?
I'll tell you what, I haven't seen anything like that since what they did in the Super Bowl. I'm not likening this team to that Super Bowl team, but I was making noises in the press box, which is definitely a first for me, just because I was so stunned. I mean, I remember back in, of course, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's an older fella. In training camp, the very first practice, he hits Desean Jackson on a deep ball, and then afterwards he's telling us, man, I haven't done that in a while. You know, my arm's getting a little old. I'm going to need to ice this thing. I might be sore for a few days. And lo and behold, that deep ball just kept working for them over and over again. In particular, the chemistry between those two guys was just really, really something. So I got to say, especially because of having a backup quarterback and everything, and of course Eagles fans know all about that with Nick Foles, but in the case of this offense, they've had all these weapons, and they just haven't been able to put it all together. They really haven't had anything to show for it, and then finally they feel like they have all those pieces together, and then their starting quarterback, Jameis Winston, gets suspended. You know, so you're not expecting a ton of things from Ryan Fitzpatrick. You're just hoping the defense can kind of keep it close, but then you're knowing, okay, well, they're going up against Drew Brees, so that's just not going to happen. But lo and behold, Ryan Fitzpatrick goes out there and just has an unbelievable game. So I'm still scratching my head over what I saw.
Yeah, Jenna, I mean, obviously here in Philly, Carson Wentz, when he's ready, everybody anticipates he'll be back in there. What was the mood like around with Ryan Fitzpatrick? I mean, is there a thought that, hey, if this guy continues to play like this, now his career has been filled with games like this, and then he reverts back, but what if he has another game like that? Will you start to hear some whispers?
You got to wonder. I mean, I said that in my write-up right after the game, and I understand there is that cycle of Fitzpatrick. I think some people even call it the cycle of Fitzmagic, where he has a few good games, he gets streaky, and then you make him the starter, and then all of a sudden it just goes downhill from there. You know, I still think, though, hey, nobody gave these guys a chance to win any of these first three games. Most people around the league, including the locals, predicted they were going to go 0-3. They were going to be in a big hole. So just winning one out of these games is big. But the way they played, it's like, wow, you know, it looks like Dirk Cutter and he really made the right call. Him and offensive coordinator Todd Monken really made the right call by giving Fitzpatrick all those first-team reps during camp. But you just got to wonder now, okay, well, what's Jameis going to what's he going to come out like after that week 3 game? So Monday Night Football against the Steelers. And that's another thing too, is it's going to be on a short week. So, and that's, I think that both head coach and general manager were very wise to not declare a starter. I think at first I was actually critical of the move, because I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, kind of mess with your starting quarterback's head a little bit. But now I can kind of see why. So I think the question definitely needs to be raised, but you also got to wonder, can he continue this? He's got to be consistent.
Jenna Laine covers the Bucs. What's the latest in the feeling on Desean Jackson? We know that he has tortured his former team in the games with Washington against the Eagles. So him being in the lineup is a big boost, big time, big play threat. So what's the feel on Desean Jackson this week?
I'll tell you what, a few days ago, I was not optimistic at all that he was going to play, because he was in some type of pain in the locker room, both with the shoulder, and you could just tell the way he was at his locker. You can't talk to guys after the game, although I did just kind of go up to him and just say, hey, man, like, I'm really sorry. Like, you killed it out there. You know, and he just kind of, he looked at me. You could just tell that he was, like, out of it. But the fact that he's practiced for 2 days this week, he wasn't there for their padded practice on Wednesday, which I get that, you're in the concussion protocol. But part of the protocol and getting clearance is that you do have to still practice as you're approaching clearance, and you'll exert yourself physically without actually having contact. And then afterwards, you kind of check in and see, all right, how are you feeling? And some guys go backwards after that. It's not uncommon to see that. But he was out there for 2 consecutive days, and I think that's a positive sign for him. But he still has to clear it, though. So I think it's kind of up in the air right now. Haven't gotten the official injury report. But I think it's a lot more optimistic than it was earlier in the week. If he can't play, though, by Chris Godwin, that, some people are starting to hear more and more about, but they really feel good about his future. He was arguably the most consistent weapon that they had all throughout the offseason. And a lot of times, you guys know, with offseason, in California, work with the speed coach. And so Godwin got all of those reps, those first-team reps opposite Mike Evans, and you can really see it paying off. He doesn't have the speed that Desean has necessarily, but he can still be that deep guy. He can still make play threat, and he's a guy that really, really competes for the ball like you see from a Mike Evans. So they're really, really, really excited about him.
Jenna, give us some insight on what this Tampa Bay Bucs secondary is going to look like this Sunday against the Eagles.
I'll tell you what, it's a real head-scratcher because not only is Brent Grimes not expected to play, but Vernon Hargreaves is now done for the season because of a shoulder injury. And so they did sign Marcus Williams. They did sign him, not the safety, of course, the cornerback. And he gives them some experience. They're just really, really, really young. The next most experienced guy is Ryan Smith, and this is only his third year, but it's only playing corner in this system. And, you know, he's a guy that's got a lot of speed, but he also is a lot and can make some mistakes. And then they've got two rookies. They're really excited about those rookies, but they're
we got a connection issue with Jenna Laine down there in Tampa. We'll try to get her back on the line because I'm interested to see if during the week and how this week the question in that locker room has been about the Eagles' pass rush against their offensive line.
That's the key. That's if you're another team going up against the Eagles, this defensive line has to be keeping you up at night.
Yeah, and I think we got Jenna on the line, so go ahead and ask her that one.
Jenna, you back with us?
I am. I don't know what happened. I'm driving to do a radio show, and normally I didn't know there were any dead zones around here, so I apologize.
Hey, no problem. We're glad to have you back. So Mike and I just talked about it real quick when we lost you for a second. How do you think the Bucs offensive line is going to handle this Eagles defensive front this week?
I'll tell you what, I was really impressed with them because I think the Saints have a better pass rush than they get credit for. You know, I think Cam Jordan, obviously, he's starting to get the respect. Who had a knee injury, and I was really surprised that he was able to play last week. Asked me a couple weeks ago, knee, but he did really, really well. And the protection obviously had to have held up this past week for Fitzpatrick to be able to chuck those passes downfield. But yeah, I mean, it's no secret that this Eagles defensive line, and of course, you know, you've got a couple pieces from it last year now on the other side of the ball. They're certainly tough, and they realize that protection, again, this week has to really be at a premium, maybe even more so.
One area yesterday, Jenna, we were talking with Anthony Becht, and he had mentioned to us, you know, here's a guy who played tight end in the league, and he said if he was a tight end, he would really like playing against this Tampa Bay defense. That seems to be an area where they struggle. Now, Zach Ertz, is he a guy whose name has been brought up a lot from the Tampa defense this week?
Well, he has to be, of course. He's a guy that, I mean, you just mentioned his name, and all around league circles, he's a guy that you know who he is, and you know you always have to account for him on the field. And I know for a few years there, especially, it seemed like this defense really had some struggles with some of these tight ends. You know, I look to a guy like a Justin Evans. I know that he's got the ability to, and he's a second-year safety, he's got the ability to cover a lot of different types of players. You know, sometimes you get these mismatches where you put a receiver on a guy like him, and or I should say you put him on a receiver, and you know, in a lot of cases, you get a receiver on a safety, and it's a favorable matchup for the receiver, but that's not the case with him because he's just so athletic. And he also has a mix of being able to do a lot of different things, including covering tight ends. So I'd be curious to see how, in fact, he fares in that situation. I think he's got a bright future, too.
What's the key matchup from the Bucs side of things that you feel like they can really focus in on this week and try and steal a win at home against this Eagles team?
Well, as far as, honestly, I think one of the big things that they can do, and this isn't necessarily a matchup. I mean, I've been looking at a few different things. I didn't like the way they matched up against the Saints this past week in terms of, you know, the Saints really surprised them by spreading the ball out. And I think that just the sheer deception that I think the Eagles use with a lot of their play calling, you know, the fact that you always have to kind of be watchful, you always got to be mindful of those little gadget plays. I don't think they necessarily handle the surprise all that well. Even their linebackers, which is a strength for them, I thought that they struggled at times with some of those option plays this past week. You know, I'd be looking for that. But then also on the other side of the ball too, I think that, you know, one of the things, and this sounds silly, but one of the things Dirk Cutter was talking to us about today was he expects the conditions for this game to be a lot like how they were for the Bears last year. And their home opener last year, that was week 2 for them. They had a bye week in week 1 because of the hurricane. That was an oppressively hot game. And granted, you don't really think too much about the weather and everything, but this time of year, you take whatever advantage you can get. It wouldn't surprise me, especially with the way their offense did this past week, although their defense certainly has to be on point to be able to allow them to do this. But it wouldn't surprise me if they went up tempo just to try to wear out this Eagles defense just a little bit, because again, it is, even for those of us who have lived down here our whole lives, it's pretty darn hot right now.
No, and that's something that Anthony also mentioned yesterday, having played for the Bucs. He said, we took these September games and we looked at them almost as must-wins because we know we have a decided advantage with that heat. They hope to try to wear the Eagles down, and we'll see it all happen right here on 97.3 ESPN. The Eagles and the Bucs, we've got you covered. Merrill and Mike have the call for you starting at 1. Jenna Laine covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, ESPN.com, and she was kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.